Welcome to Inside Lake Forest Extra. I'm Eileen Weber, your host, and today I'm visiting with David Forlow, who's the producer of the Scots Lake Forest Project. David, nice to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to learn more about this project. Now, let's start off with a little bit of history of you being a Scot in the area.
Well, I'm not originally from Lake Forest. I've lived in Lake Bluff about the last 20 years, but for the last 35 years I've been a member of a charity called the Illinois St. Andrew Society. It's the oldest charity in Illinois, about 170 years old, and it was founded in Chicago by Scots. I moved to Lake Bluff about 20 years ago, and at one point we realized that many of our original members of our charity were original residents here of Lake Forest. And so the kind of project began looking at those two groups and how they overlapped, and how we found that Scots essentially were the backbone of the original part of the town.
How long have you been working on this project?
Embarrassed to say more than 3 years. We thought it would be a few months, but pictures and information has come to us from all over the country, every corner of the United States, Canada, New Zealand, England, Scotland. Families have heard about the project saying, hey, my grandfather, great-grandfather came from Scotland, lived in Lake Forest. Here's pictures, here's information.
Let's talk about when the premiere and where it's going to be held at.
April 11th, the Lake Forest Historical Society is co-hosting. It'll be at the Armour Mansion at Lake Forest Academy from 2 to 4 o'clock. Reservations can be made through the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Historical Society.
Great, so people can sign up through them, and they can find them on the website, or they can call.
Exactly.
You don't have to be a member to attend, so we're welcoming people of all ages and historical backgrounds, and just an interest in the Scots project.
And it's kind of interesting, we chose that spot purposely. The Armour family were from Scotland. That building was built, that house built by a native-born Scot, and the first employees, the cook, the gardener, chauffeur, all from Scotland. Armour, not only, of course, a Lake Forest resident, was a member of our Scottish charity, so he was one of those families that were connected both ways, Lake Forest plus our charity.
Fabulous. I'd like to give a little bit more of a sneak peek, if we can, David, to those who might have some interest in the project, and talk a little bit about Lake Forest and the founders here that played a role as Scots in coming here. Can you name a few of those individuals?
Sure. So the first postmaster here in town was a Scot, last name Steele. And that's who we think it is, at least. And so some ministers took the train up, stopped the train where there was no stops, climbed off, walked around, and said, this is the place. And so they raised money, bought land. The first mayor here in town was a native-born Scot. First road builder, first police officer, most of the first fire department. And I think mostly by word of mouth, fellow Scots, fellow Presbyterians came to town and worked from digging ditches to building mansions and everything in between.
So David, who do we have here?
So this is John Peary. He was born and raised in Errol, Scotland, and he, with his business partner Carson, worked in Glasgow, Scotland as trainees, and decided they would like to open their own dry goods store. So they came to the U.S. They made a pit stop for a few months in Northern Ireland, and then came on to the U.S.
And the second photo then?
This is John Peary, the son, who lived on Rosemary Road here in Lake Forest. He was actually born in Brooklyn. Married a girl in Brooklyn whose parents both came from Scotland, and we found a lot of that where we don't call them arranged marriages, but Scots married Scots and went out of their way to marry Scots. They moved to Lake Forest. The business, of course, grew, and it's Carson, Peary, and Scott as we know it today. Members of the Carson family, Peary family, and Scott family all lived here in Lake Forest. If you look closely at the business, the logo contains a Scottish thistle.
Wow.
The front main door of the store, there was a plaque with a quote from a Scottish poet. The families really felt strongly about their heritage.
Wonderful. David, we've got a grocery store here right on Western Avenue. Tell me about that.
So that's between the Walgreens and the Lake Forest bookstore now. Charles Thompson Gunn was one of, I think, 15 kids born in Caithness, Scotland, and they all came to the U.S. They came in 2s and 3s as they could afford to arrive. Charles worked as odd jobs here in town, then he opened his own grocery store. This is one of his grocery stores along Western. Currently on Deer Path Road, the First Midwest Bank, the kind of English Tudor-looking building, that's the C.T. Gunn building. That was his grocery store later. He employed other Scots, brought over siblings, and at one point there were 6 different Gunn family members from Scotland that lived here in town.
Wow, it's really neat to see even Griffith, Grant, and Lackey's original location when they just recently moved to Deer Path,
Yep.
but was here, and we've been there for our show as well as the bookstore.
Sure.
So it's neat to see the history
Yep.
remain and continue here in
Yeah.
Lake Forest. And our next image is,
This is Alex Kelly. So
okay,
one of the first residents in town was a James Anderson who worked for the first mayor, Sylvester Lind, came from Scotland as well. He was hired to cut trees, clear lots.
okay.
He eventually decided to import Angus cattle. So the very first herd of black Angus cattle anywhere in the U.S. came right here to Lake Forest and was kept near Lake Forest Flowers and
Great.
CVS in a cattle lot. And one of the shepherd boys who brought over the cattle was this gentleman, Alex Kelly. He ended up bringing 2 loads over. With the second load, the ship was caught in the St. Lawrence Seaway in ice for something like 7 or 8 weeks. He lived in a ship with 6 cows and a bull. Finally got those to Lake Forest and said, that's it, I'm not going back, I'm going to stay. So Alex became the road builder here in town, and literally about half the roads here in town were built by Alex and his sons, hauling rock up from the beach, horse, buggy. That's his granddaughter, and as you can see wearing a kilt. They were still very proud of their heritage 2 generations on.
And when we think about the Angus burger, we can think about it
Lake Forest.
Lake Forest.
It came here first.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then our next photo.
So this is the former Lake Forest House antique store here on Deer Path. That's since closed. It originally was a blacksmith shop. This is the Murray blacksmith shop. The Murray family came from Perthshire, Scotland. And kind of interestingly, the folks here in the picture, many of them were Scots. One of the horse and buggy gentleman there, last name Haney, whose parents were from Scotland. He worked for the Peary family.
Okay.
This is John Galt. He was from Scotland. James King is in this picture. He worked for 35 years for the village. He ran the city, excuse me. He was the town clerk. He was another shepherd boy who brought over cattle. And then various members of the Murray family. Some might remember Murray Dry Cleaners. That's along Western Avenue. That's the next generation of Murrays. They went from blacksmith to dry cleaners.
Wow, it's just amazing. And David, I know this is just a tiny little piece of all the history and the work that you and your colleagues have been doing for this project. How do they reach you, David? Do they reach through the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Historical Society?
That's probably easy. So you look through there, they put you in contact. They're of course on the internet, email. But yeah, we'd love to hear from people. Really love to. You may have just a family story you think's not important. It's important, I think. We've crammed in about 100 families, 500 different pictures, but there's a lot, as they say, left on the cutting room floor. So we really do intend to do version 2, version 3, and keep expanding this.
And now let's talk a little bit more about the premiere. So people can sign up for that through the Historical Society.
Yes.
Wow, so many ties to Lake Forest, and Lake Forest is a really special place.
It is.
Well, David, I want to thank you so much for learning and sharing your passion with me today. I want to thank all the viewers and encourage you to view the premiere on April 11th at the Armour House. Thank you for watching Inside Lake Forest Extra. I've been with David Forlow with the Scots Project of Lake Forest.